Dr. Joe in studio. Full Cavalier attire, I might have this morning. Wasn't that sensational?
That was just fantastic.
Well,
and the way it was, the game played out was awesome.
From a medical perspective, we have a little bit of a sidebar there. LeBron takes a rough tumble.
Yeah.
In the closing minute of play, we were all fearful. You looked at it from a medical perspective.
Yeah.
Talk about what you saw.
We always worry about the injury aspect, and of course, I wrote a book about all the injuries. So in this series, the shoe was on the other foot. Iguodala going down, Bogut going down. Those were two things that played in the Cavs' favor. But late in the game, when LeBron went down, and we as Cleveland fans wearing the Cleveland fan hat, is he going to shoot left-handed? Is he going to, are we going to let them come down and get a three? We go into overtime. We don't have LeBron because he broke his wrist. I was worried about wrist. LeBron has spoken in his career. He had a wrist fracture. It's one of the few things that slowed that incredible athlete down was a wrist fracture. And he talks about, he's really adamant about one play in basketball he really doesn't like is when you're in the air and get cut underneath. Because when you land on an outstretched hand, there's a very high risk of wrist fracture, and there's just nothing you can do to protect yourself when you're up in the air. The injury is an injury. There's a bone in the wrist called the navicular bone or the scaphoid bone, one of the 8 bones of the wrist. And it is really common to break on any fall on an outstretched hand where the whole body weight goes down on the wrist. So watching it in slow motion, I was worried about that. That injury is one that doesn't heal well. It needs a pin in it often to fix it. It often still doesn't heal well and can need to be fused. So it can have not only short-term implications, okay, you're out for 8 weeks, it can have long-term implications because you lose motion in the wrist, which is a big deal, huge deal for a basketball player. So, of course, all those types of things were running through my mind.
Well, I was fearful when I saw him land of the shoulder, the way he came down. But talk a little bit about that wrist bone and why you see that injury.
Well, you're right. Guys who have been up there that have had wrist, a lot of times they try to roll into a fall and they may injure their elbow, or you could injure the shoulder with a dislocated shoulder. So those types of things, but your whole body weight falling on the wrist and forcing the wrist into extension, which is pushing it backwards. There's just, when you go to a point where there's no further that the wrist can go, the bone that gets caught in between is a little bone. It's C-shaped, canoe-shaped, we call it. And it cracks sometimes, and it's called the scaphoid or navicular bone. Very common. Athletes try to play with it. On any given high school team or local team, there's kids because, say, for instance, in football, there's 80 kids. It's hard to know the difference between a sprain. A week or two later, the pain is down. The kid starts taping the wrist, never gets an x-ray. It never heals right. They need to be pinned or fused, and they lose a lot of motion in that wrist. So it's one that we are really adamant about in sports medicine, needs to be checked out with an x-ray.
Dr. Joe Congeni, Sports Medicine Center, Akron Children's Hospital. Joe, before I let you go, you said, Ray, did you see the story about the Russian athletes?
It's just so weird is the ban on the track and field team. A couple points about it. It's both the women's team and the men's team. And they've had so many positive tests, they went ahead and banned the entire team, right? And as of yesterday, the ban was being upheld. But what's happened that's just unusual in sports is the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, that we hear about a lot, that runs tests. I did not realize the shenanigans going on in Russia. They were tampering with some of the tests. They were evading test takers. When the test takers from WADA would be at some of these events, at one of the events, the Russian track and field athlete was in a race, ran out of the stadium, left the stadium and could not be tested, or if they know that a person's being tested that day, they've left the venue to not be tested. There's upwards of 20-plus Russian athletes that have left the scene when the WADA organization comes to test them. Now the outcry is from those athletes who say, hey, I'm clean. How can you ban the whole team? The International Olympic Committee is dealing with, do they let some of the track and field athletes compete? Do they ban the entire team? There's been many positive tests and many evaded tests. And right over there now, it's kind of crazy. We've never seen this before in drug testing at the international level. And what's going going on in Russia is really an eye-opener.
All right, Joe. Thank you for the visit. Love the shirt, by the way.
Yeah, thanks so much. Everybody in Northeast Ohio, enjoy this period of time. It took a long time to get to this, and like we said, nothing is given, everything is earned. It was an amazing run. Thanks, Ray, for everything you did to document it.
There you go. Dr. Joe Congeni, Sports Medicine Center at Akron Children's Hospital with us.